The leader decided to follow his driver home one night, thinking he was just being careful. But what he found at a secret location would reveal a crime so terrible that it would shock everyone in Burkina Faso. Before we start, what time is it where you are? Which country are you watching from? Leave a comment and let me know. And please hit that like button and subscribe to become part of the Commander Ibrahim Traore community. Commander Ibrahim Traore sat at his desk inside the presidential office in Ouagadougou. The flag of Burkina Faso hung on the wall behind him. He had spent the whole afternoon looking through security files. Something did not feel right. For several weeks, he had noticed his personal driver acting strange. The man would answer phone calls and walk away quickly. He would look around nervously when he thought nobody was paying attention. The commander always trusted his gut feelings. Those instincts had saved his life many times before. Tonight, he would follow his driver and find out where the man was really going after work. The sun was going down over Ouagadougou. The commander told his driver to take him home like always. They drove through the crowded streets. The driver stayed quiet, which was normal. But his hands held the steering wheel tighter than usual. His phone rang twice during the trip. He did not answer either time, but the commander saw the stress on his face. They reached the commander's house. The commander got out and thanked his driver. He walked toward his front gate, but he did not go inside. Instead, he quickly moved to a side street where he had parked a plain car earlier that day. He waited and watched as his driver drove away. Then the commander started his engine and began following from far behind. The driver went east, away from the busy roads. He drove for almost 30 minutes, leaving the city completely. The commander stayed far back, keeping his headlights off as it got darker. The roads became rough and bumpy. Dust flew up behind the driver's car. They passed small villages where fires burned outside people's homes. The driver turned onto a dirt path that led toward the village of Kumbri. The commander knew this place. It was far from everything. Very few people lived out here. His heart started beating faster. Why would his driver come to a place like this? The driver finally stopped near a big building surrounded by tall walls. The commander parked his car behind some trees. He got out quietly and walked closer on foot. He could hear voices, men's voices. They were talking low, but he could hear the urgency in their words. The commander crouched down behind the wall and listened carefully. He heard his driver talking to another man. They were discussing shipments, routes, and ways to avoid police checkpoints. The commander's blood ran cold. This was not just suspicious behavior. This was organized crime. He moved along the wall until he found a small gap. He looked through, and what he saw made him sick to his stomach. Inside the area were dozens of young boys. Some looked only 12 or 13 years old. They sat on the ground, chained together. Their faces looked empty. Their eyes showed no life. Guards walked around them carrying guns. The boys did not speak. They did not move unless someone ordered them to. The commander had seen many horrible things in his life, but this was different. These were children stolen from their families, sold like objects, and treated worse than animals. He watched as his driver handed a thick stack of cash to a tall man who seemed to be the boss. The man counted the money slowly, licking his finger after each bill. He nodded, satisfied. Another man brought 3 more boys forward. They looked terrified. Their hands were tied. One of them was crying quietly, tears running down his face. The driver looked at them like they were animals for sale, checking their arms and looking at their teeth. The commander felt anger building inside him. His own driver, a man he had trusted for over 2 years. A man who knew his schedule, his movements, his family, and his home. This man was part of a child trafficking operation. The worst kind of criminal. The kind that hurts innocent people. The kind that destroys lives for money. The commander pulled out his phone and took pictures. He recorded videos. He documented everything. The faces of the criminals, the layout of the compound, the number of victims, the weapons, and the vehicles parked inside. But he knew he could not act alone. If he rushed in now, the others would run away. Some people would die. The boys might get hurt in the confusion. This network was bigger than just one location. He could see that clearly now. The organization, the money, and the confidence of these men showed they had been doing this for a long time. He needed to be smart. He needed to destroy the entire operation completely, leave nothing behind. The commander went back to his car and drove back to Ouagadougou. His mind was racing the whole way. How long had this been happening? How many children had been taken? How many families were searching for missing sons? How deep did this network go? He arrived home just before midnight. He did not sleep that night. He sat in his home office and made phone calls, secure calls on encrypted lines. He contacted his most trusted officers, men he had fought alongside in battle, men whose loyalty could not be questioned, men who would die before betraying their country. He told them what he had seen. He sent them the evidence through secure channels. Each officer who watched the footage reacted with the same horror and anger. By sunrise, a plan was ready. They would attack multiple locations at the same time. They would arrest everyone involved. They would rescue every victim they could find. But they needed more information first. They needed to know the full size of the network. The commander decided to let his driver continue his normal routine. It was risky. Every instinct told him to arrest the man right away. But if they moved too quickly, the leaders would disappear. They would start again somewhere else. The suffering would continue. So the commander played his part. The next morning, he arrived at the presidential building as usual. His driver picked him up, smiling and greeting him politely as if nothing had happened. The commander smiled back. He made small talk about the weather. He asked about the driver's family. The driver answered easily, lying without any hesitation. Inside, the commander was counting down the hours. His intelligence team worked day and night. They tracked the driver's phone. They watched his communications. They identified his partners. The network began to show itself. There were compounds in 5 different areas, safe houses in 3 cities, corrupt officials taking bribes to ignore what was happening, transport companies moving victims across borders, and financial systems washing the dirty money. It was massive, well-organized, and pure evil. The commander attended meetings at the Ministry of Defense. He talked about national security with other officials. Some of these men might be involved, he thought. He watched their faces, their reactions, and their body language. He trusted no one outside his small inner circle. 1 week after the commander had followed his driver, they were ready. The operation would happen at dawn. Over 300 soldiers and police officers were given instructions. They knew nothing except their specific targets and what to do. Only the commander and his core team knew the full plan. The night before the raids, the commander barely slept. He thought about the boys in that compound, about the families waiting for news, about the evil men who thought they could not be touched. He thought about his driver, who would wake up tomorrow expecting another normal day. That afternoon, the commander told his driver he had a meeting in the northern area. The driver nodded and started driving. They headed out of the city, taking the main highway north. But this time, they were not alone. Unmarked cars followed them from every direction. Military units were already waiting at the compound near Cumbri and at every other location they had found. Helicopters were ready to fly. Roadblocks were being prepared. The entire operation was timed perfectly down to the minute. When they reached the edge of the city, the commander gave the signal, a simple word spoken into his phone: "Go." The vehicles around the driver's car suddenly sped up. They blocked him in from all sides. Armed soldiers jumped out with weapons raised. The driver's face turned white. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He tried to reach for something under his seat, but the soldiers were faster. They broke the windows and pulled him from the car. They held him down on the ground. The driver fought and yelled. He demanded to know what was happening. He said he was innocent. The commander stepped out of the car slowly. He walked over to where his driver lay on the ground with soldiers holding him down. The commander looked his driver straight in the eyes. He said nothing at first, just stared. He let the man see the knowledge in his face. He let him understand that everything was known. When the commander finally spoke, his voice was ice cold. He told the driver exactly what he had seen that night near Cumbri. He described the compound, the boys, the chains, and the money changing hands. The driver's face fell apart. His lies died in his throat. There was no point denying anything. The evidence was too strong. While the driver was being arrested, Teams of soldiers moved on the compound near Cumbri. They approached in darkness, surrounding the entire area. At exactly 5 in the morning, they rushed in. The guards inside barely had time to understand what was happening. Some tried to fight back. They were stopped quickly. Others tried to run. They were caught within seconds. The tall man who had taken money from the driver was found hiding in a storage room. He was dragged out and arrested. The operation was fast and precise. Within 20 minutes, every criminal in the compound was in custody. The boys were set free. Medical teams rushed in. The children were scared at first, thinking this was just another move to another terrible place, but the soldiers spoke gently to them. They removed the chains carefully. They brought water and food. They wrapped blankets around thin shoulders. Some of the boys fell down in relief. Others could not stop crying. A few just stared, unable to believe that their nightmare was ending. At the same time, raids happened at compounds in Wahiguya, Dori, Fadangorma, and Bobo Dioulasso. Safe houses were raided in Ouagadougou, Koudougou, and Banfora. Over 150 criminals were arrested in a single morning. The coordinated operation was the largest in Burkina Faso's history. News spread fast. By noon, every radio station in the country was reporting the story. By evening, international media had picked it up. The commander held a press conference at the presidential building. He stood with the Burkina Faso flag visible behind him as cameras flashed. He explained what had been discovered. He showed photographs of the rescued victims. He named the arrested criminals. He promised that justice would be quick and harsh. He also made another promise. This was not the end. It was the beginning. His government would hunt down every trafficker operating in Burkina Faso, every corrupt official who helped them, and every person who made money from human suffering. There would be no mercy and no exceptions. The press conference lasted an hour. Reporters asked many questions. The commander answered each one directly. He did not hide behind political language. He spoke clearly about the evil that had been uncovered and the determination to destroy it. That evening, the commander visited the temporary shelter where the rescued boys were being cared for. Medical staff were treating injuries. Counselors were providing support. Aid workers were trying to identify the children and find their families. The commander walked through the building quietly. He stopped to speak with some of the boys. Most were too hurt emotionally to say much, but their eyes followed him. They recognized him from television. Some reached out to touch his hand as he passed. One young boy, no more than 14, walked up to him directly. The boy had bandages on his wrists where the chains had cut into his skin. He looked up at the commander and asked a simple question. "Why did you help us?" The commander knelt down to the boy's level. He told him that every child in Burkina Faso was his responsibility, that no one deserved to suffer the way these boys had suffered, that as long as he had breath in his body, he would fight to protect the innocent. The boy nodded slowly. Then he said something that hit the commander deeply. He said his name was Musa. He said he had been taken from his village 8 months ago. He said he thought he would die in that compound. He said he had stopped praying for rescue because he thought no one cared. But now he believed again. The commander placed both hands on Musa's shoulders. He promised him that he would be safe now, that they all would be, that they would go home to their families, that they would have a future. Musa began to cry, not tears of sadness, but of relief. The commander hugged him, this boy who had survived terrible horror. Other boys gathered around. Some of them joined the hug. For the first time in months, they felt human again. Over the following days, the investigation grew bigger. The driver confessed during questioning. At first, he tried to say his role was small. He said he was just a messenger. He said he did not know what was really happening. But when shown the video evidence and confronted with testimony from other arrested criminals, his story fell apart. He gave names. He drew maps of locations. He provided financial records he had kept as insurance. The network stretched across Burkina Faso and into Mali, Niger, and Côte d'Ivoire. Money moved through multiple countries. Victims were sometimes moved across 3 or 4 borders. Some were forced to work in mines, others on farms. Some disappeared into criminal groups that investigators could only guess at. Government officials were involved. A deputy minister in the Interior Ministry had taken bribes to make sure police looked the other way. 2 judges had dismissed cases against known traffickers. Several military officers had provided security for transport routes. Business owners had knowingly employed trafficked children. The commander did not hesitate. He ordered arrests at every level. Rank meant nothing. Connections meant nothing. Money meant nothing. No one was above the law, not even those who wore uniforms or held positions of power. Some of the arrested officials tried to use their influence. They made calls to colleagues. They threatened legal action. They offered information in exchange for lighter punishment. The commander refused every deal. These men had betrayed everything they swore to protect. They had sold out their own people. They deserved no mercy. Trials began within weeks. The justice system in Burkina Faso had never moved so quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. Videos, photographs, financial records, testimony from dozens of victims, and confession statements from lower-level criminals trying to reduce their sentences. The courtroom was packed every day. Families of victims attended. Journalists filled the seats. Citizens watched from outside, listening to proceedings broadcast through speakers. The driver was tried alongside the tall man from the compound. Both were charged with human trafficking, kidnapping, and conspiracy. The prosecution presented video of the driver handing over money. They showed his phone records proving months of communication with traffickers. They brought forward 3 boys who identified him as the man who had inspected them like cattle. The driver's lawyer tried to argue that his client was just following orders, that he was a small player in a much larger organization, that he deserved consideration for cooperating with investigators. The judge was not moved. He pointed out that every person in the trafficking chain made a choice, that following orders did not excuse participating in slavery. That cooperation after being caught did not erase the suffering caused. The driver and the tall man were both sentenced to life in prison without any possibility of release. When the verdict was read, families in the courtroom burst into applause. Guards had to restore order. The driver stared straight ahead with no expression. The tall man shouted that this was unfair, that he would appeal. The judge silenced him and had him removed from the courtroom. Over the next 3 months, 47 people were convicted. Sentences ranged from 15 years to life. The deputy minister who had taken bribes received 25 years. The judges who had dismissed cases were stripped of their positions and imprisoned. The military officers were dishonorably discharged and sentenced. Assets were seized. Homes, vehicles, bank accounts, everything connected to the trafficking money. The money was moved to a victim compensation fund. But the commander knew this was not just about punishment. It was about prevention, about building a system that would make such crimes harder to commit. He launched a national task force dedicated only to fighting human trafficking. It included military personnel, police investigators, prosecutors, and social workers. They operated with major authority and resources. He opened shelters for rescued victims in every region. These were not just temporary holding places. They were proper care centers with medical staff, counselors, teachers, and job trainers. The goal was not just to house victims, but to help them rebuild their lives. He created hotlines for reporting suspicious activity. The numbers were posted everywhere, on billboards, in schools, at markets. Citizens were encouraged to call if they saw anything concerning. Every tip was investigated. He worked with international organizations to strengthen border security. New checkpoints were established. Guards received training on identifying trafficking victims. Plans were developed for handling suspected cases. The commander traveled to neighboring countries and met with their leaders. In Bamako, he sat across from Mali's president and discussed cross-border cooperation. In Niamey, he worked with Niger's security forces. In Abidjan, he signed agreements with Côte d'Ivoire for information sharing. These meetings were not just for show. They resulted in real actions: joint patrols, shared databases, coordinated raids. Trafficking networks that had operated freely across borders suddenly found themselves under pressure from multiple sides. Back in Burkina Faso, the boys from the compound were slowly reunited with their families. Social workers had worked hard to identify each child and find their relatives. Some families lived in remote villages and had no idea their sons had been found. Messengers had to be sent. In some cases, parents had given up hope. They thought their children were dead. The reunions were emotional beyond words. Mothers cried openly. Fathers who had not cried in years broke down. Siblings hugged brothers they thought they would never see again. The commander attended several of these reunions. He did not do it for praise or publicity. He did it because he needed to see the faces of those he had saved. He needed to remind himself why he did this work, why he spent sleepless nights reviewing reports, why he pushed himself and his team so hard. In the village of Rayo, he watched as a mother was reunited with her son after 11 months. She had reported him missing to the local police, but nothing had been done. She had searched herself, walking from village to village, asking if anyone had seen him. She had spent every bit of money she had trying to find him. When she saw her son step out of the vehicle, she screamed his name and ran to him. She held him and cried. She touched his face as if to make sure he was real. The boy, whose name was Adama, held onto her and cried too. The commander stood at a distance, watching. He felt tightness in his chest. This was why. This moment. This reunion. This family made whole again. In the village of Tugan, a father was reunited with two sons. Both had been taken on the same day while walking to school. The traffickers had grabbed them right off the road. The father had nearly lost his mind with grief. He had blamed himself for not walking with them that morning. When his boys were brought home, he fell to his knees and thanked God. He hugged his sons so tightly they could barely breathe. He kept repeating their names over and over. Musa, the 14-year-old boy who had asked the commander why he helped, was reunited with his mother in the village of Kaya. She had been a widow, and Musa was her only child. When he was taken, she had lost everything. She had stopped eating properly. She had stopped caring for herself. She had lived in a fog of grief. When social workers brought Musa to her door, she collapsed. She thought she was dreaming. Musa helped her to her feet and held her. They stood in the doorway holding each other for nearly 10 minutes, neither able to speak. The commander was present for this reunion too. Musa's mother walked up to him afterward. She took his hand in both of hers. She told him that he had given her back her life, that her son was everything to her, that she would pray for him every day for the rest of her life. The commander accepted her thanks humbly. He told her that Musa was brave, that he had survived something terrible, that he would need her support and patience as he healed. She nodded and promised she would give him everything he needed. Not all reunions were possible. Some boys could not be identified. They had been taken so young they did not remember their family names or villages. Others had been trafficked from other countries, and the process of returning them was complicated. Some families could not be found. Perhaps they had moved. Perhaps they had died. Perhaps they had simply given up and disappeared. For these boys, the commander created a special program. They were placed in group homes with dedicated staff. They received education and training. They were given a chance to build new lives, even though they could not return to their old ones. Months passed. The rescued boys began to heal. Some returned to school. Others learned trades. Musa, the boy from Kaya, showed exceptional determination. He studied hard. He did well in mathematics and science. He told his mother that he wanted to join the military when he was old enough. He wanted to protect others the way the commander had protected him. The commander received letters from several of the rescued boys. They wrote to thank him. They wrote to tell him about their progress. They wrote to say they were happy again. The commander kept every letter. He stored them in a special box in his office at the presidential building, where the Burkina Faso flag hung behind his desk. On difficult days, when the work seemed too much, he would read these letters. They reminded him of what was possible, of what was worth fighting for. The trafficking network had been broken, but the commander knew the work was not finished. New threats appeared constantly. Other criminals tried to fill the space left by the arrested traffickers. Corruption still existed in corners of the government. The battle was ongoing, but something had changed in Burkina Faso. The story of the commander and his driver spread across the nation. People talked about it in markets, in schools, and in homes. It became a lesson, a warning, and a source of hope. Parents taught their children to be careful. They explained the dangers. They told them what to watch for. Communities became more alert. Neighbors looked out for each other's children. Strangers were questioned. Suspicious vehicles were reported. Citizens became partners in the fight against trafficking. The hotlines received hundreds of calls every month. Most were false alarms, but some led to real discoveries. 3 smaller trafficking operations were shut down based on citizen tips. 12 more victims were rescued. 7 more criminals were arrested. The culture began to shift. People no longer assumed that someone else would handle the problem. They took responsibility. They acted. They refused to stay silent in the face of evil. And at the center of it all was a commander who had refused to look away, who had followed his instincts, who had risked everything to do what was right. 1 year after the initial raids, the commander held a ceremony at the presidential building. The Burkina Faso flag was flying high. He honored the soldiers and police officers who had participated in the operation. He recognized the investigators who had built the cases. He thanked the social workers and medical staff who had cared for the victims. He also invited some of the rescued boys to attend. Musa was among them. The commander presented them with certificates, recognizing their courage. He told them and everyone present that these young boys were heroes, that they had survived terrible hardship, that they deserved respect and admiration. Musa spoke briefly. He thanked the commander. He thanked everyone who had helped rescue him and the others. He said that he had learned something important, that evil exists in the world, but good is stronger. That darkness is real, but light always finds a way through. That one person acting with courage can change everything. The audience clapped. Many people in the room had tears in their eyes. The commander shook Musa's hand. In that moment, he felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel: pride. Not in himself, but in his country, in his people, and in the strength of the human spirit. The driver remained in prison. He would spend the rest of his life there. Sometimes the commander thought about him, about how a man could betray trust so completely, about how someone could look at suffering children and see only profit, about how evil could hide behind a friendly smile and polite greetings. But mostly the commander thought about the boys, about Musa pursuing his education, about Adama safe with his mother in Rio, about all the children who had been given back their futures. He thought about the families made whole again. He thought about a nation that had looked into darkness and chosen to fight back. The commander continued his work. He remained alert. He never assumed safety. He never took loyalty for granted. He reviewed reports every day. He met with his task force regularly. He visited border checkpoints without warning. He inspected shelters to make sure they maintained standards. Because he knew that evil does not rest. It adapts. It finds new methods. It takes advantage of new weaknesses. And so the fight continues, not with dramatic raids every week, but with patient, steady effort, with watchfulness, with systems and structures built to protect the vulnerable, with a culture that refuses to accept exploitation. Sometimes the biggest victories are not the big ones. They are the quiet prevention of crimes that never happen. The children who make it home safely because someone was watching. The trafficker who gives up because the risk is too high. The official who chooses honesty because consequences are real. Years from now, historians might write about the commander who broke the trafficking network. They might describe the dramatic raids and the trials. They might list the numbers: 150 criminals arrested, over 300 victims rescued, 47 convictions. But the real story is not in those numbers. It is in the boy who made it home to his mother, in the father who held his sons again, in the young boy who decided to join the military and protect others, in the nation that said enough and meant it. The commander sat in his office late one evening. The building was quiet. Most staff had gone home. The Burkina Faso flag hung behind him, barely visible in the dim light. He opened the box of letters from the rescued boys. He read through them slowly. Each one was a reminder, a reason, a purpose. He thought about that night when he had followed his driver, about the choice he had made to investigate instead of ignoring his suspicions, about how easily he could have dismissed his concerns as worry for nothing. One decision, one action. That is all it took to change hundreds of lives. Not superhuman abilities, not unlimited resources, just the willingness to see what others ignored, the courage to act when action was needed, the determination to follow through no matter the cost. The commander closed the box and returned it to his desk drawer. Tomorrow there would be new challenges. new threats, and new battles to fight. But tonight, he allowed himself a moment of reflection, a moment to think about what had been accomplished, a moment to honor those who had suffered and those who had fought to end that suffering. Because sometimes the people closest to you are the ones hiding the darkest secrets. But if you stay alert, if you trust your instincts, if you act with courage, you can stop them. You can save lives, you can change everything. And that is exactly what the commander did. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.